In the year 701 BCE, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, led a vast army against the kingdom of Judea. King Hezekiah, who had rebelled against the Assyrian Empire, now confronted the world's greatest war machine. The Assyrian army was powerful and extremely well organized. It was composed of a hierarchy of officers, professional soldiers, and specialized forces, cavalry, archers, infantry, and engineering corps. Upon its arrival, 46 fortified cities fell, one after the other. The revolt's oppression reached its climax with the conquest of Lachish, the second most important city in the Judean kingdom. In his prophecies, the prophet Isaiah warns, "Now therefore, behold, the Lord bringeth up upon them the waters of the river, mighty and many, even the king of Assyria and all his glory, and he shall come up over all his channels, and go over all his banks. And he shall sweep through Judah, overflowing as he passeth through, he shall reach even to the neck." Sennacherib boasts of his successes in war, and especially of the conquest of Lachish. He orders the carving of a 12-meter-long relief depicting the city's conquest. The relief panels were displayed in Sennacherib's palace in Nineveh and were only uncovered 2,700 years later. They are currently exhibited at the British Museum in London. The relief accurately portrays the operation of the Assyrian war machine, from the Battle of Lachish to the parade of war captives in front of Sennacherib's throne. Depicted in the panels are huge siege machines that enabled the army to break into the besieged city, as well as sophisticated battering rams, deadly stone slings, skilled archers, and more. They also depict psychological warfare tactics employed by the Assyrians to dishearten the Jewish warriors, such as displaying captives impaled on wooden spikes, skinning of live prisoners, and other horrific forms of torture. Despite all of these, the residents of Lachish fight valiantly. They are shown throwing flaming torches, chariot wheels, and anything they could lay their hands on at the heads of the Assyrian soldiers. Their efforts are to no avail, and the residents of Lachish that survived, mainly women and children, and all the spoils of war that were plundered, were exiled and forced to march humiliated before King Sennacherib, as he sat reviewing them on his throne. In the relief, above Sennacherib's head, there's an Akkadian inscription explicitly referring to the conquered city of Lachish. Sennacherib, king of the universe, king of Assyria, sits on a throne, and the spoils of Lachish are paraded before him. Now that Lachish has fallen, the Assyrian army marches onward to Hezekiah's city, Jerusalem, capital of Judea.
This fantastic event. So Clive, what do we have here depicted in this relief?
This was absolutely unique. It was the first time a siege had been discovered that had been depicted in relief. We see that the Assyrians have built a siege ramp between 14 to 16,000 tons of rubble, and up it is going this marvellous siege engine. There are 3 people in it. We can't see the one who's trying to steer it up, a man with his bow and arrow, and the incredible fellow looking the wrong way with a great ladle of water to put out the flaming torches that are coming down to try and set it on fire. They also discovered at Lachish 2 chains with like great fish hooks on them where they tried to catch it and flip it up. And this is a cartoon. You have to think cartoon because the chaos of war, so you see the mayhem of war, but refugees coming out. At the bottom here we have a very sad scene where people being impaled. This is the forerunner of crucifixion. This is how Moses would have been executed if the Egyptians had caught him. This is how Haman wanted to put Mordecai to death. Moses refers to it as cursed is anyone who is hanged on a tree. And in Acts chapter 10, Peter at the house of Cornelius doesn't say Jesus was crucified, but he was hanged on a tree, linking back to this horrendous way of dying.
We've moved along here, Clive. What does this part of the relief show?
This is truly hideous. The 2 main leaders of Lachish have been staked out on the ground and they're being flayed, that is skinned alive. And their skins will then be taken and put on what remains of the city gate as a warning to all not to rebel. Also, what I think is really gruesome is that they've got 2 children, I hope they're not related, looking on. If Sennacherib had got into Jerusalem, in all probability, this would have been Hezekiah and Isaiah. So when Isaiah says, trust in God, he will save you, he literally took his skin in his hands.
This relief is so detailed. What do we have here, Clive?
Here we see the king himself, Sennacherib, sat on his ivory-clad throne with his feet on his footstool. His enemies would have been depicted on them, and that is the background to Psalm 110, verse 1, that Jesus shall reign until all his enemies become his footstool. We also note that in his hand he has an arrow and a bow. The arrow is pointing down, the bow is reversed, meaning he's going to show clemency to those ones, they will not be killed. Sennacherib was a modest man. He calls himself in the inscription there, King of the Universe. And he has an arrow and a bow. The arrow is pointing down, the bow is reversed, meaning he's going to show clemency to those ones, they will not be killed. Sennacherib was a modest man. He calls himself in the inscription there, King of the Universe.
Sennacherib, supreme king, king of Assyria, sits upon a throne while the booty of Lachish passes before him.
The show must go on, as they say. I'm in Canada right now. My mother just passed away last night, and the undertakers took her this morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we clean up her room. Anyway, Biblical Archaeology Tuesday. Today I'm going to do the Siege of Lachish. Siege of Lachish is it's a fascinating story. It's not really recorded in the Bible. It was just a blip. Sorry, in the Bible. I'm doing this outside. It's very windy. It's a beautiful day in Toronto. The Siege of Lachish was just mentioned in a blip in the Bible, but we find more of it in the Sennacherib annals, the annals of the Assyrians, in their writings, where they detail the whole siege, and there are bas-reliefs, that means carvings of what happened throughout the siege. So after the Assyrian kings Shalmaneser and Sargon II had decimated the northern kingdom of Samaria, they destroyed Samaria, the northern kingdom of Israel, the capital. He deported all the Jews to the other parts of the Assyrian kingdom, and he got people from the other kingdoms to come and live in Samaria, intermarry, and therefore, but while we may think, or most records say that the 10 tribes of northern kingdom were disappeared, they did not. Some of them moved south to near Jerusalem and lived outside the walls of Jerusalem. So there were remnants, there are always remnants. And then under Sennacherib, after Sargon II came Sennacherib, his son. And Sennacherib, the son of Sargon II, the Assyrians now set their sights on Jerusalem and the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom. First, Sennacherib has to go through Lachish to get to Jerusalem. So the siege of Lachish and the eventual defeat and destruction of Lachish was final. It was a major battle, but like I said, the Bible has only a few lines. And Sennacherib was there. He sat in his camp as he watched his people batter the walls of Lachish and enter, and the fight was so furious that it's amazing they won. And at the end, he sent his commander with a letter to King Hezekiah. Yeah, Hezekiah was king of Judah. His being at the capital, Jerusalem, and sent a letter to him. I said, hey, buddy, look what happened to your friends in Lachish. Why don't you surrender? Because at that time, King Hezekiah refused to pay tribute, and he thought he could last it out, but we will see what happened. And later, after Sennacherib, king of Assyria, it's kind of hard, and all his forces were laying siege to Lachish. Like I said, he sent his officers to Jerusalem to warn the king of Judah, Hezekiah, the king of Judah, and for all the people of Jerusalem, to frighten them, say, hey, we're coming to get you, people. Micah chapter 1 verse 13 warns of what will happen to Lachish. Harness your chariot horses, O dweller of Lachish. You were the beginning of sin. So they were destroyed because of sin. And the warning in Micah warns Lachish of the impending doom. It's not like they have no warning, they did. So, daughter of Zion, for the transgressions of Israel were found in you also. Just as Israel's sin, the same sins are found in you also. And we find the details of the siege of Lachish in the Assyrian documents, and in the Lachish relief, a well-preserved, the wind is driving me crazy, and the noise from the neighbor's lawnmower. So, after the Battle of Lachish, for some reason, the Bible tells us why Sennacherib could not get into Jerusalem. It was a miracle. So he went home, and in his palace, he built a whole room that depicted everything that happened in the siege of Lachish. And these things were discovered by archaeologists, and they now decorate a whole room at the British Museum. I've been there, I've seen it, but not really understood, and therefore was not impressed. But if I should go again, I know what happened and will be more impressed. And I don't know if I'm going to post again. I'm going home in a week. I'm just staying on because I was forced to by the Canadian immigration. They wouldn't let me enter if I did not commit to staying 14 days. We had a row at immigration. I was almost turned back and deported. That's a story for another time. But I'm okay. She's in a better place. I'm just honored and privileged to have watched her as she took her last breath. It's